Hi, folks, and welcome to the March 11th edition of Money and Politics. And today we are going to be discussing the update on Forwardly as they hold their first ever investor call. And as we look at this today, Forwardly shares of stock closed at 64 cents, down again by a penny, so not a big deal from yesterday. But we're going to be listening. We covered the video that George Sharp put out, and we'll be taking a look at that. There was no particularly big news, and I don't know where any of you started knowing about Humbl and knowing about Forwardly. But Sharp, and I took some notes, just went over a number of things, and I'm going to gloss over some of this because a lot of what he said, I don't think, frankly, most of us care about. There's a couple of key things to talk about, and I'll say that. One, he said that Forwardly right now has no revenues. That's kind of confusing in a way. If I am an unemployed billionaire, I'm unemployed, but I have $1 billion sitting in the bank, I could say, I have no revenues. And that would sound like I'm worse off than a kid who's working at McDonald's, who's earning a paycheck, who does have revenues. But of course, common sense would say, me sitting at home, not working with $1 billion in the bank, makes me better off than the kid with a small income coming in. And that's the case with Forwardly. So they have no revenues, but they certainly have plenty of assets, okay? And I looked at a number of these, looking at the notes here. Let me just say that I'm going to skip over most of it because most of it would make your eyes glaze over and you don't care. He talked a little bit how they're in ventilators. I'm sorry, George, I don't care, okay? I mean, maybe that'll come to something in the future. It might be a, semi-decent profit line. But it's not going to be consequential, in my estimation. You can certainly tell me I'm wrong. Here's what we are going to look at. First, we're going to have George talking about the splits, and this is a pretty short. He's going to be talking about the splits and the value of the warrants. Now, I should back up. When George had his company Forwardly and another company, he said, which he didn't name, they put in $200,000 into Tesoro, the flooring company, into Tesoro back in October. And that, in exchange for that, at the time he said the price of Tesoro was 2 cents. They got the right to buy 500 million shares for 5 cents. Now, since we know there's been a split since then, the 4-for-1 reverse split. So this is George talking about that.
We now have 125 million warrants exercisable at 20 cents. But the net value is exactly the same as it would have been had we had 500 million warrants exercisable at 5 cents.
Okay, now, the other thing is, he said that these warrants, what they're doing, and let me bring up something I want to go over with you. The value of these warrants. Now, the warrants, if you don't know, what he has is a right to buy these shares of Humbl in the future. Going from memory, Forwardly has the right to buy these shares in the future beginning in November of 2021. And they have to conclude whatever purchases they're going to make, they have to conclude those by December of 2022. If they have 125 million shares of Humbl that they can buy at 20 cents through the warrants, then with the current value at Humbl at $2.99 a share, where it is today, you take $2.99, subtract the 20 cents that they can buy those shares for, 125 million, and you get a net value of $2.79 a share profit to Forwardly as of today. Now, if you take $2.79 a share and multiply that by 125 million shares, as of today, those warrants that Forwardly got for an investment of $200,000, those warrants are worth $348.7 million. Now, folks, if the price, that's as of today, if the price of Humbl goes to $6, then the value of those warrants would be about $701 million. If they go to 12, they're going to be over. If Humbl goes to $12 between November of this year and December of 22, you could extrapolate that that would be worth approximately $1 billion. I mean, they get to buy up to 125 million shares of Humbl for 20 cents a share. So you take the current share minus 20 cents, that gives you the value, and then multiply that by 125 million shares, and you get how much money that is worth to Forwardly. It is one of the greatest deals, maybe in the history of mankind. And so, what does that mean? That means that going forward, this is why I don't care, George, that you're building ventilators, portable ventilators, and you're doing some other little deal. What's going to matter is when you really get this money and you start investing in other things, if you want to invest in other things. He could be like Warren Buffett with Berkshire Hathaway. Berkshire Hathaway, it's not only the stock trading of Warren Buffett, but he goes in and buys businesses, Warren Buffett does, like Geico Insurance. Now, our European viewers and Asian viewers may not know that, but it's a big insurance company. Warren Buffett went in and bought that. He bought other businesses. Forwardly could be doing that. They're going to have so much money. They could be a miniature version. I'm not saying they're going to be on par with Warren Buffett, but they could be a miniature version of that. And so they're going to go from being worth their current value of 64 cents. That's where Forwardly closed today. Let's bring that up again. They closed at 64 cents. They could go from being worth 64 cents to who knows what. I'm sorry, I don't know exactly how many shares they have to give you, if you had $1 billion worth of warrants, what would that mean? I don't know for sure. Now, let me bring up another clip here. This is George Sharp talking about how they are going to maybe try to monetize those warrants that they can't exercise until November, how they might be able to monetize those warrants to some extent between now and then. And he's saying that they haven't made up their mind. They might go to a bank and borrow against them. They have investors willing to give them cash up front, basically trying to say, we'll buy some of those values now and be able to cash them in later. Here's George talking on that.
Humbl is growing so fast that we think the value of the warrants over time will only increase and increase tremendously. We are probably going to look at leveraging those warrants so that we can make further investments. Now, we may sell some of those warrants for cash. We may just leverage them for cash. We may borrow against them. There are a lot of options, and we are already getting a lot of inquiries from investors who want to deal with those warrants.
So that's that. What that says is what we thought, that Forwardly has hitched its wagon to Humbl, and with Humbl having, we all think, or most of us do, quite a positive future, Forwardly could stand to grow tremendously. So it gives us a little bit of a clear idea. As I say, George talked, I don't know, it was maybe in the area of 25 minutes or so. Those were to me, the things that were of most value. Also, George, for those of you who don't know, and he's the CEO of Forwardly, George Sharp. George Sharp has been known for about 10 or 11 years as being a whistleblower on the over-the-counter. He sees, as he mentioned, old ladies getting ripped off by fly-by-night scallywags who start up businesses, take people's money. If you've seen the movie The Wolf of Wall Street, you get an idea of some of the corrupt business practices that are practiced by some on the over-the-counter market. And George Sharp has kind of taken it upon himself to be, you might say, the sheriff, to expose some of these bad players in the over-the-counter market and to try to flush them out. And he said, I'm going to continue to do that, and if you think that's bad for business, then maybe you shouldn't be investing with Forwardly. I would say, given what George has already pulled off by turning $200,000 into the current value as of today of $350 million, and doing that in about 4 months, then that is not a bad rate of return on the investment. It's quite great. And so, as I said already, when we are looking at the value of Humbl going up tremendously over the coming year, then it's just amazing what we might be able to achieve in the value of Forwardly. Now, that's primarily what I have for you today. I was going to talk maybe about digging some of the other things, but I think we'll end it here. And folks, my thought is that right now I would be holding on to Forwardly. I mean, you could buy more. It's at 64 cents. There's no telling where this is going to go, but as I say, this could be $1 billion company. They're now currently, as of today, valued, as I've already explained, at about $350 million just on those warrants. And so with that, I mean, here's a man running a company that, to my knowledge, I think he said he really doesn't even have any employees to help him go through the mail. So not a bad deal. One of the greatest trades in the history of mankind. As far as Humbl, before we close out, I don't have too much more. I mean, it's like I said, here's from the other day. I don't have today's numbers, but you see that the average volume is 27.6 million shares. This whole week we've been doing very little volume. You saw this is from just the other day, where we're doing a small fraction of what we normally do. And, you know, folks, as I said, just to make a point, I'm going to make an extreme example. If you had no shares traded except for me, one person, selling 100 shares, and I sell them below what the market closed at, let's say I sold my 100 shares for 5 cents below what Humbl closed at the day before, and the total shares traded were not, the 27.6 million shares, but let's say it was just 100. Well, all of your shares, everyone's shares in Humbl are going to be based upon my 100 share trade, being down, let's say, a nickel. And so that's what's happening. You say, well, the shares are down. They're down on little volume. You got to look at the conviction behind the numbers. And if we had the average being 27.6 million, which is the normal average daily volume, And if the stock went down on not 27.6, but went down on 50 million, that would tell you everyone's selling. People are just dumping their shares. But when you have light volume, you have a lot of owners not trading. And so you get a few people that are, and if it goes down by a penny or two, that's just based upon a handful of people selling their shares. It really isn't something to be panicking about. And I would bet when we start to go up, I've talked before, you get people running for the exit sometime, fearful and selling, and not, I just mean in general, not about Humbl. But you also have panic buying, because I want to get on before it goes even higher. And I wouldn't be surprised if in the weeks ahead we could see that in Humbl. I say that because we're going to have the end of March is the first quarter. Then we're going to have the audited numbers coming out in April. And we're going to hear, I think, some positive news about how much they've accomplished in the very first quarter of their operation with Humbl, with the I'm still trying to get used to their terminology. They're not ETFs, they're ETXs, with the marketplace, with the studios, and with the app, of course, and with tickering. So I think good news is on the way. I think we'll close this out, and we have two stocks that we will continue to follow. A lot of news, a lot of good times, I think, coming towards us in the weeks ahead for both Humbl and Forwardly. For that, tonight, I'll sign off. Thanks for joining me, and please keep your cards and letters coming in, as they used to say. Keep your email comments coming in. I try to respond to them as much as I can, and they're always